Week 7, all about percents. We're just basically gonna skim the surface on what percents are, converting them from percents to decimals and from percents to fractions. The most important thing that you need to know about a percent. A percent is out of 100. So everything that we will discuss with a percent, you need to know it's completely out of 100. You can't go over 100 in what we're talking about now. There are instances where percents can be 200%, 300%, 400%, and 500%, and we'll get into that in 8th grade. But for right now, remote learning, you just need to know that percents are all based out of 100. Just remember that. It's just like when you take a test. You get 8 out of 10, that's an 80%, 80 out of 100. So if I were to give you, I'm not going to draw a 100 square grid, but if I were to give you, we're just going to pretend, this is 100 squares. And if I gave you 55%, how you would illustrate that using a grid of 100 squares is you would shade in 55 of the squares. So 55% is 55 out of 100. So that's how you would write that as a fraction. Again, we are pretending that this is a 100 square grid. If I asked you to shade in to illustrate 22% of this 100 square grid, you would shade in 22 squares. So that means that 22 out of 100 is 22%. So you'll see maybe 2, 3, 4 problems like that on your practice work. You'll see a bunch of these. And it'll ask you to write that as a fraction. Well, all percents are based out of 100. So just do 33 over 100. 6%. All percents are based out of 100. So you get 6 100 out of 100. 6 100ths. 128%. All percents are based out of 100. So 128 out of 100. Let's go 538%. To write that as a fraction, put it over 100. Because all percents are based out of 100. So that's how you go from a percent to a fraction. Now it might ask you to turn these into mixed numbers. And if you were to ask to be turned these into mixed numbers, 128 out of 100 is one whole, because you have a whole 100 out of here with 28 left over. For this one, we have 5 wholes, 5 100ths out of here with 38 left over. So that is going from percents to fractions, and in certain instances, into mixed numbers. A percent to a decimal. convert this into a decimal, remember, everything is out of 100. How many zeros does 100 have? 2 zeros. So we are going to replace the percent with a decimal. And we are going to move that decimal 2 places to the left. Why did we move the decimal 2 places to the left? Because percents are out of 100, and 100 has 2 zeros. %. Replace the percent with a decimal and move the decimal 2 places to the left. Now, because there's no number here, you have to add a 0. So our answer is 0.03. Now, how do we say this number? 27 hundredths. How do we say this number? 3 hundredths. %. We are going to replace the percent with a decimal and move the decimal 2 places to the left because 100 has 2 zeros. So our answer is going to be 1.48. 1 and 48 hundredths. Every now and then you might see a percent that's already a decimal, which means it's a very, very small percentage. Let me show you what I mean. .12%. Now to turn that into a decimal, we have to move the decimal that's already given 2 places to the left. So our answer is going to be 0.0012. Tenths, hundredths, thousandths, 10 thousandths. So that number is pronounced 12 ten thousandths. Very, very small number. A decimal is already present, so we're not going to replace the percent with the decimal. We're going to use the decimal that's already given, and we're going to move that decimal 2 places to the left. Our answer is 0.148. 148 thousandths. So if you can remember to move the decimal 2 places to the left, you're going to be just fine. Now, going hand in hand with that is taking a decimal and turning that into a percent. When we went from a percent to a decimal, we went to the left. We were dividing. Now that we are going from a decimal to a percent, we are multiplying. So basically, our decimal is going to go to the right, which means this number, this 0.95, it's going to be represented using larger numerals. The value is the same, but we're going to be using larger numerals. So 0.95 would be 95%. So these are equivalent, that's why I have the equal sign here, but the number 95 is bigger than the number 0.95. So when I say we're multiplying and making the numerals bigger, that's what I mean. .02. Move the decimal 2 places to the right, and our answer is going to be 2%. 3.81, move the given decimal 2 places to the right, 381%. Very small number. Move the decimal 2 places to the right, 1, 2. So our answer is going to be 0.06%. And that's basically how you convert a decimal to a percentage. You're technically multiplying by 100, but if you don't have a calculator available, you just move the decimal 2 places to the right. And again, we're moving the decimal 2 places because 100 has 2 zeros. And then finally, which one of these is bigger? There's a couple ways you can do it. You can turn these into fractions, both of them. You can turn them both into percentages, or you can turn them both into decimals. So I'll start with this one, and I'll turn it into a fraction. And then the next one I'll turn into a decimal, and the next one I'll turn into a percent. So if I want to write this as a fraction, all percents are based out of 100. So this is 20 out of 100. As a big boy and a big girl, tenths, hundredths. So we would say 2 hundredths. So what's bigger, 20 out of 100 or 2 out of 100? 20 out of 100. So that was if you wanted to turn all those into fractions. So what if you wanted to turn these all into decimals? Well, this one is already a decimal, so that's going to stay the same. Replace the percent with a decimal like we did before, and move the decimal 2 places to the left. So start here. Our first digit is a 0. Look here. Our first digit is an 8. So which number is bigger, 0 or 8? 8 is the bigger number. So that's if you want to turn these into decimals. And then the last one is if you want to turn them into percents. And you guys can figure out how you want to do these. It doesn't matter to me. You can turn all of them into percents, turn them all into decimals, turn them all into fractions. It really makes no difference. So this is already a percent. So that's 1.2%. Here, we'll multiply this by 100. And if you don't have a calculator, that's fine. Just move the decimal 2 places to the right and add a percent sign. So this becomes 12%. So now you just have to ask yourself what number is bigger, 12 or 1.2? 12 is bigger. And that's it. Have a good week.